Hello again. In today's episode, my role here is pretty.
I'm simply a noisemaker, so you can hear the wisdom of the happiest man I've ever met. If you look at the world around us, there's a global sense of claustrophobia closing in. It feels like happiness is the thing most of us are struggling with right now. How to be happy. With that, I'd like you to meet my friend Eric. So, dude, how's it going?
It's going pretty good, man. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, dude, it's pretty wild. Things are getting kind of crazy.
Yeah. Glad to see everyone's healthy. Hope everyone's healthy out there. And, yeah, what's new and exciting? What's going on?
Yeah, starting some things. But, you're a pretty incredible guy because, so we've known each other since fourth grade.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you're like a freaking Yoda, dude. You've always been just this most insanely happy guy that's always... You're never down. You never let anything, like, slow you down from anything.
Yeah. It's a lot of work, man. I don't know. Through trials and tribulations of life, obviously we've known each other for the better half of our lives. So we've seen the ups and downs we've all gone through. And honestly, I think at the end of the day, what helps me maintain that vibe, I guess, is knowing that there's energy and happiness within everybody. It's just a matter of how you can tap into that and or tap into your own self-happiness and find what makes you wake up in the day every day and okay going to sleep every day and waking up the next and just keep on going. So there's a lot of food for thought that can almost create that sense of idea or sense of vibe and happiness within all of us. It's just seeing past the thick and thin and understanding you gotta do what you gotta do, and it's what really counts. It rubs off, and rubs on to other people. So, I mean, that's my little tidbit. Obviously, there's lots more to come from that, but
So you're a pretty adventurous guy, and you've done some pretty crazy stuff. Like, what's the secret recipe to a good adventure?
no plans, only directions. And by directions, meaning north, south, east, or west, and just whatever happens, you just gotta let it happen, and just be on the drive for the adventure. And the more and more you try to plan things, the more your expectations might actually get let down. And by no means am I saying don't have goals or don't plan for goals, but just be prepared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know about preparation all the time.
Yeah.
Like, I'll never forget the one time you called me like, "Hey, dude, I moved to Pennsylvania." I'm like, "No way." You're like, "Yeah, the van broke down. We'll be here for a while."
Yeah.
Like, but I mean, it's incredible because like even when we were, in like middle school and in high school, like you had this network of people from everywhere, like
Yeah.
people coming up from Mexico, people coming up from Texas, people coming out from Pennsylvania, like coming out to go ride BMX at the trails.
Yeah.
Like most of us were just kind of stuck in the 30-mile radius of people we could, engage with, and then here you are like reaching out to the world.
Yeah. And this was long before like what we have at our hands today is social media. And I think my tool of choice was a bicycle, and just going to the skate parks in all the different states and seeing all the different walks of life, regardless of what color you come from, what type of background you came from, white collar, blue collar, it didn't matter. At the end of the day, we still shared the same enthusiasm to create or to share the same experience. We all enjoyed riding skate parks and building trails and skateboarding and all of that, those fun activities. And it's crazy to look at it where I stand now at the age of 30 and see that we're still doing it, and the same circle of friends just keeps expanding and expanding with the new faces and smiles we see, just because of they're interested and they're inspired. And I think that inspiration leads to a lot of compound interest, and it just, I don't know. There's a lot more out there, and a lot more out there to discover and see, and I don't know.
So
It's just fun being such a from a young age, and then just coming home and always having something to share, or some crazy wacky adventure to always bring back, and seeing your friends smile from that and be like, how'd you get yourself into such a troublesome activity, or how'd you get yourself into such a different adventure, so to speak? And I don't know.
So, I mean, you got to talk about what's got to be the most amazing thing
Yeah.
you guys have done.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's the trails. Talk about that magical little place you got there.
So in 2005, we lost a set of trails of ours that we've, as a group community, have put together just a place to ride our bikes. And when that got taken down, we like always are just driven. We found another place, and we're squatters, we're on state land, and it turned into be a world-renowned activity, place to see, site, and we dubbed it called Willow Street Trails. And fast forward to now, current time standing, we were cursed with the possession of the property being purchased, and then we were blessed with the man who purchased the property, who was willing to negotiate with us in keeping all of our hard work and combatant efforts alive. And it's something that's a lot of work, but now in the time that we're at, to see all of this hard work potentially become something legal and legitimate and something for everyone to come and enjoy. It's not so much a secret anymore. It's emotions and feelings that are very hard to describe. It's a lot of hard work that paid off, and to be able to share that now is pretty neat. So
Yeah, I mean, it was so cool when you told me what was going on, and that there's actually, there's a path to take this thing that you guys have built and actually be legit with it.
Yeah.
And be on the level, because I mean, it's hard for people to understand, but we're talking about literally just like this patch of woods that's just in the middle of nothing. And you guys, we went back there with our bicycles with some shovels and some stuff we stole from our parents', shed, and spent a lot of summers clearing out some old brush. And I mean, but you got to get into just the little magical things about that place, because it's so extensive.
yeah, we have our own ecosystem we've essentially created. We took what we didn't know at the time was unbuildable land. What we have learned that is now unbuildable land because it's swamp and waterways. But we have created an ecosystem to where animals and frogs and all sorts of acts of nature are able to coexist with us in harmony. We're not disruptful. We're not destroying things to create things. It's a nice equal energy for nature and our creation. So it's kind of neat. And we have everything established where we have our own irrigation to where we can water all the jumps. We can cover them all when a storm comes to keep them all nice and pristine. It's an actual establishment minus the constructs of an establishment.
And I mean, that's the really crazy thing, is you really get like this sense of like humility when you go to the trails, because it's so obvious that everybody who has worked on building that place has done it with such care.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't think you'll find any community that is more focused on ensuring that it's clean and it's well managed, and that everything natural is being used to its fullest extent, to the point.
Yeah.
I mean, when did we start digging out the underground, living room kind of
Ooh.
thing, with that now is starting to get a pizza oven?
Yeah, we have a hole that's maybe 13 feet deep and about 20 feet in diameter.
It's
Depending how you
insane.
look at it. We built a deck over top of it, nice chill area, and we were going to be establishing a nice grill out little area and whatnot. And I don't know, it's just amazing to see, even though if you don't ride a bike or pertain to any action sports, there's
an outlet for your artistic or constructive ideas. And it's a great environment. It's just amazing to see all the ideas and what people bring to the table to want to create, or to even have to even think about, for that matter. We have a berm. Imagine your Hot Wheels track as you were growing up, where it went in a 360. We have a berm that resembles that, where you ride into it and you ride around in a 360 and you jump over the entrance of where you came into the berm. And just living out childhood ideas and fantasies that, I don't know, is this possible? And you go and you find out. It's a lot of trial and error. And with that trial and error, there's a lot of downtime, of course, but that downtime allows you to makes the tunnel where the light's poking through a lot wider and a lot more rewarding at the end.
Yeah, I mean the weird thing that ends up there that's like so cool is all the little artwork, like you were saying. Like there's all these little sculptures everywhere.
We got gnomes everywhere. We have little garden beds. We have little native flowers. We have some invasive flowers. It's just a nice ecosystem. It's chill. We got hammocks. You can come hang out. It's crazy to see what a diverse group of people who come from white collar work, suit and tie, to blue collar janitor. Not demeaning any work by no means, but the difference between the walks of life to be able to get together and create something that we all enjoy. It's very enlightening. It's very positive. It's something very nice to share and share with others. And the concept of talking about it it's hard to put words to images, but if you all would like to, check out Willow Street Trails on YouTube, or just Google us and you'll find loads and loads of pictures and all the internet has to offer about that stuff.
The awesome thing is, like, so you guys have built the trails that we know of, but like this is kind of a underground phenomenon across the country.
Correct. Two of my best friends and partners in crime went on a worldwide excursion 2 years ago and went to New Zealand and Australia for the better half of the winter, just to ride these erected dirt mounds we choose to create and spend so much time enjoying. But the community that coexists out in other parts of our world is so different, but it has so much similarity and compassion for the end goal of enjoyment in reality. And it doesn't matter where you're walking, or if you're sad or depressed or something like that. You just go to the trails or go hop on something that you enjoy, and the world just changes for you like that.
So, like, how many other trails? Like, I know you go out to Pennsylvania a lot. Like, where else around the country are these kind of places?
Every state.
Every state?
Every state. There's something. There's a hidden gem. We've created a map.
Is that map public at all?
No, this map is secret to our own bedrooms. And atlases we have in our vehicles and GPS tags. But just about every state, there's a group or a community who has either a public set of these trails or an underground set of trails. And I don't know. It's a nice treasure hunt to be able to go and try to seek out these random gems. And that's just part of the adventure. It's just going into town and going linking up at a skate park, or a random spot in the city where everyone meets, and just seeing what's popular and where the scene's at potentially, and kind of going from there. You get to meet some really interesting people through just doing that.
Yeah, I mean, dude, you know some characters.
Oh yeah,
That's for sure.
yeah.
But so, like, a lot of our friends growing up, like, we all played video games. We're all about, like, just playing with, like, the cool toys our parents got us. But, like, you're always like, dude, let's go to the woods.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, let's go wander the woods. Like,
Yeah.
so talk about the woods a little.
I don't know. There's a sense of like reconnection to the potentially where we all grew up wandering. Maybe I don't know. That's my idea and view. But seeing how I'm very deeply rooted to history of like the deep past ancestors beyond all of the pyramids and all of the the constructs that were created. I feel that we're all some way, shape, or form related to a hunter or gatherer or survivor of some means, and being out in that type of environment, it humbles you. It kind of puts you in your place where you really stand in the big city or in any sort of environment for that means. You know, it gives you a little fright, it gives you a little excitement, it toys with your emotions, and it kind of helps build your own individuality and creates a little wisdom for you. It builds a little backbone in you. Not that you're doing anything outlandish or ordinary, just the drive for adventure is essentially what kind of, that forceful drive for adventure, even though I maybe not have had that drive for the adventure, but just forcing yourself to go on that adventure. It's rewarding. So that's kind of my deeply rooted needs to the woods and nature and the outdoors in general. Not so much the hunting, gathering aspect, just the where we came from aspect.
So you don't want to be running around like Upper State, Washington with like a 50 cal on a 4x4,
I mean, it's
ripping out deer.
As exciting as that sounds, and as American as that could be, it's a little excessive.
Oh man.
In our current state of events, maybe, I don't know. It's a little frightening, but yeah, it's an interesting concept, seeing what goes on in the wild west and up in Canada with the bears and all that.
Freedom can get a little freaky sometimes.
Yeah, freedom can get a little too free.
yeah. Sometimes a few rules are helpful.
Constrain a reality into a not a narrow path.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, and a lot of people would probably regard you as something of a hippie, and I guess in some ways that's true, but it's also kind of really misses a lot of the value there, and like,
Yeah.
Okay, sure, people can grow up and maybe, join some weird groups and be a hippie so-and-so, but I mean, there's really a mentality and approach to life that comes with it that you've always had.
Yeah.
I mean, it's wild. You've always just had this very thoughtful and engaged perspective on everything.
Yeah, and I think for my upbringing, what kind of I'm going to relate this to is it takes a village to raise a child, and with that being said, I had an amazing amount of influences due to my father and mother and their past lives and who they're connected with and still rooted with and all, and still talk to this day, that may have showed me some of the harsher realities of life at a younger age, and also showed me the amazing realities of life at a younger age. But what they never got frustrated with was the redundant questions that I would have, and I think that has left me with not questions, but it has left me with the ability to just observe what's occurring around me. And if I'm seeing something or someone who's uncomfortable, I'm not going to say I can relate, but I can understand that we're all vulnerable to being uncomfortable, and you just have to take a step back and realize that we're all human in that aspect. And some people learn things at a different rate. Some people are shown things at a different time, and I don't know. To sum that up, I'm just very grateful for the childhood that I did have and the people who I did come in connection with at those times in my life when time was ready.
Yeah. Well, like, and your dad, man, he's a character. Like,
Yeah, to say the least.
I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a parent so willing to give a kid so many tools and take so many risks. Like, I mean, he really is, he just feeds you life right at the moment. Like, you want to do that? There's the tools. Go do it. Figure it out. You're probably going to mess it up 15 times, though.
Yeah, and I necessarily didn't have any rules in my household, but there was a lot of discipline, and behind that discipline, there was a lot of instilled principles. And as long as I understood those principles and everything was gravy in the household. So old man just let me rip, just let me do what I wanted to do, and let me tell you, he laughed a lot when I would come home and be like, "Really, really, that's what you have to say, or that's what you had to do," and shake his head, not in doubt, but just in his opinion, and I knew it was his opinion, and I understood what he taught me and understood what I learned, but at the same day, there's those underlying principles that we still laugh about, we still come to the agreement of at the end of the day. So, job well done, Pops.
Yeah, you guys have done some pretty wild little project cars. It's
Yeah.
like, wait, what are you doing?
Yeah.
It's like Frankenstein, fun monsters.
Yeah, putting Corvette motors in BMWs and, just anything that's cheap and you can get your hands on at a junkyard just for good fun. And, hey, it's a learning experience for who else doesn't have the experience. So I got to learn how to weld and machine and wood cutting and all that stuff without any rules. Here's the safety equipment, don't cut your thumb off type of thing. And
Yeah,
OSHA would not be proud, but
it was fun.
yeah. And Pops was a sailor and everything too, so he kind of his roots grew up very, very calm and just setting 3 sheets to the wind and letting whatever happened happen, being a little bit in control of it. So there's a lot that could be said with that, but nonetheless, like Pops definitely instilled a lot of wisdom and made friends who came over, made sure they laughed and made sure that if they were in any sort of discomfort or something like that, he would try to break their shell and crack their egg and get them out of their shell a little bit and wiggle around, or maybe feel uncomfortable so they would feel comfortable after they realized how uncomfortable they could feel. So he had some funny tactics that made real life less frightening. Not so many monsters out there.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure exactly how I want to phrase this, but like the hippie mob that we all hang out with, there's just a wild perspective about life and everything in that crowd, and I mean, I don't think there's any other group in the world that's just such an embracing and let's go have an adventure and lose ourselves a little.
Yeah.
And but like, what are some of the things and the different ideas and wisdom that the hippie group would like to remind the rest of the world that maybe we've forgotten as we keep looking at our phones for answers?
You can go far by yourself, but you can go further together. And remembering that, I mean, this is redundant, but remembering that if you're in a position that's potentially better than others, try to leave the door cracked open for others to come along with you, and don't be so selfish with things that you gain. Don't be so selfish with things you lose. Things like that. It's kind of it's weird to look at what the hippies instilled in all of us, but at the same token, that there's a lot of love and understanding that we're all human at the end of the day here, and we're all personally entitled to our own happiness, but the fact of the matter, if we can be tied to each and one another's happiness, we can make the world a better place just by sharing a smile and sharing a hug. It's oddly as simple as that, and I'm not saying go give your shirt and shoes to the homeless people you see and wherever you see them. That's not what I'm seeing, but just have some compassion for people who are in the rough and talk to them. Talk to them about something, and you'll be delighted to see that they have a lot of love and compassion built up inside them as well. It's just a little sheltered with something, a little crusty on the outside, if you will.
Well, and it's worth pointing out what we haven't said is drugs, because everybody looks at that as a tool to go beyond your comfort, but it's really not necessary. And like you can, there's ways to explore those things safely. But I mean, really, if what you're looking for is to really get the most out of life, like you really don't even need to waste your time with them.
No, it's you. In all honesty, the best drug in the world is adrenaline, and I'm not saying you all need to go jump out of airplanes to go get that adrenaline rush, but just
I would highly recommend it though.
he's right. But the sheer fact of being lost for a moment, or losing your keys, or any of those potential simple negative things that we in our day-to-day go through, those get your heart pumping for a minute, get your brain thinking, and after you've acquired whatever you potentially lost or found the direction you were going, you feel rewarded at the end of the day. And you don't need drugs to add to any more confusion than what we already are choosing to confuse ourselves with every single day, and that's called life. We're trying to traverse this swampy media that we're born into and don't really realize it until we become a teenager and an adult, until we really start requiring, not others require things of us, but we start requiring things of ourselves. And it gets really swampy and really, really murky once you stumble into those waters, but it's really not that bad. It's just, you really don't need to inebriate yourself to realize that you are in that position, and like you can procreate your happiness. You don't need to go stumble through the darkness looking for this nefarious substance or object that will give you this enlightened moment. It's all out there. People talking to people, seeing people in the grocery store. It's amazing. Just do a little people watching, pick someone and be like, "Hey sir, how's your day?" Just start a conversation with them. You'll be very, 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 very confused at first with what they might have to say and the reaction they might give you, but that's a reaction that you might need to encounter to, like, oh, all right, people aren't scary, or whatever you might be thinking. But it's just that reality of where experience is shared best with others, not with yourself. And everyone's got experiences. You don't need to go create this dream reality to go gain experiences. Just buy a megabus ticket and pick a direction.
It's actually funny because my girlfriend thinks I'm like the weirdest person in the world because I'll always say hi to everybody that I pass on the street. And like if they start to engage in a conversation, I'll have a conversation. She thinks it's the weirdest thing in the world.
Yeah.
It might be a little weird, but it's a lot more interesting. Meet some you'd be surprised who's around you if you start to ask.
Yeah.
But so there's a myth that I wonder if is the world ready to know this? Contrary to the current assessment, hippies are rather industrious, aren't they?
Oh yes. Yes, we have these days. We have quite the establishments set up. Horticulturally, we've got our own farms and processing facilities and all of those things, and we've become quite the investors and financial entrepreneurs of different avenues of resources.
All legal, for the record,
Yeah.
just because there's a little bit of ambiguity that we shouldn't put there.
Yes. But from your basic crops to your corn and soy, they all have industrious needs and all provide amazing resources for everybody to consume and use. And from that point, it's very beautiful to see some of our members who might not become from a college education have an amazing opportunity in a newfound industry and or current coexisting industries just because of our experience that we've chosen to put ourselves through and the people we've met and all the woes and woes that come with that. It's quite amazing to see that you as much as an amazing education can really get you places, people equally get you there as well. And it's quite different to look at from that perspective. Seeing some of these hippies and where they come from to where they are now.
Yeah. And I mean, if anybody's doubting that, honestly, you need to go look at Eric's garden, because his garden in the summertime is better stocked than the grocery aisle at the store. Like it's the mustard you grow.
Oh yeah.
I didn't realize I liked mustard that much. Like I completely dismissed mustard as a concept or of anything really interesting until you were like, dude, try this, and I was like, whoa.
Yeah, radishes, carrots, just everything that could feed you and feed your family. It's fresh to my family from my yard. It's everybody's. It's just it's a simple concept. It's great, you know.
And it's awesome because there's all these, like, it's weird to say, but craft farms, like, it's really wild. And but one thing I wanted to ask you more specifically about, I guess we won't say his name, but could you talk about what your friend was doing to get the BMX trails set up? Like, I know that there's some things maybe still in the works with that, but
well, through all of our connections through people who've set up skate parks and warehouses in the past, they've kind of have a nice cookie cutter formula for us to kind of model after, and that's, to kind of sum that up, it's a very difficult process because of liability, and a lot of people look at what we do as extremely dangerous, and it is, rightfully so. But on the same flip of the token there, I guess, going through the realities of the concerns in acquiring the correct insurance policies and setting up the right lock and keys to keep everyone out, the trespassing signs, and to go about all of the things like that is kind of the process. It's an infancy stage right now because there's not many trails or establishments out there that are private that are owned. There's quite a few public parks out there where they're set up through a non-for-profit organization or through a state park or through some sort of donation, of course. So what we're choosing to do is it's a little different, but like I said, it's in the infancy stages. It's acquiring the insurance and making sure that fits what the landowner is requiring of us, of course. So it's weird to say, it's a lot of negotiations and coffee, lots of coffee and lunch meetings. Lots of coffee.
But I mean, it's really cool because you know, like a few of your friends, they've actually been successful working with local villages to actually, you know, go to the village and say, look, this is something that's beneficial to the community.
Yeah.
You know, you want to talk about the problems facing youth today.
Yeah.
Let's give them something healthy to do. All right, they might break a bone. They might, you know, knock the wind out of themselves, but they aren't going to find themselves in any kind of long-term
like trouble or addiction.
Yeah.
You know? Might have an addiction to health, which that's beneficial, you know, but other than that positive, all the negatives that a skate park, trails, just a simple trail in the woods for someone to go ride their bikes down relatively fast and extreme like it's an avenue. It's an avenue for positivity. Even buying your kid a skateboard and watching them roll down the street, and it's as simple as that. It's just a different avenue, and seeing some of the difficulties that cities want to go through, and I'm not going to say utilize it as an excuse, but claim, the maintenance or the insurance, and sure, I sound like a round wheel going around talking about liability, but that's the main problem with all of that. But some of these towns, they look past that liability and they look towards what potential or what type of activity maybe this kid is going to create for himself and what type of friends he's going to meet, and look at all the positives as opposed to the handful of inevitable negatives. And to be honest with you, you all could break your leg walking down the set of stairs and trip on a rock. I mean,
Yep.
it's as simple as that. And so jumping down a set of stairs, that's got got inherent dangers, but the skills you build from conquering that fear are the end goal is really what is gained from that. Just the getting over a fear, learning what fears are, and learning how to handle them and things like that. It's amazing to watch some of these young kids at a skate park look at something that's 3 times the size of them, and I can't do that. They get all hyped up on they can't, and then they snap out of their fear, and then they just do it, and they're like, they get so giddy and amazed that, oh wow, I did this, and it just progressively steps from there. And when someone learns those principles and concepts, just simply from that right there, they can, heck, they might pick up a book and get the same reward after they finish the book. They might complete a project. So it's those reward mechanisms that are really gained from things like this.
Yeah.
Personal reward mechanisms and group reward mechanisms and things like that.
Well, like, and I hope he won't get mad if we share what he was doing. One of the things that was really unique with what your friend was doing, working with the local villages, was, he was working with villages that were, already setting aside money to build a skate park.
Yeah.
And he kind of pointed out to them that, look, instead of going and investing in this concrete structure that's going to be static,
Yeah.
and represents a significant maintenance cost,
Yeah.
to the village, why don't you use that money to set aside a few acres somewhere, get the parks guys out there,
Yeah.
build some trails, or maybe buy the land and then reach out to the community and see if there's anybody that would be willing to take it on, because I don't know if many people know this, but BMX people are everywhere.
Yeah. We're not the wealthiest group of people, so when we're presented with an opportunity to create something for pennies on the dollar that grants us a place to ride our bike for pennies on the dollar, we're flies on shit. We're all on it. It's just what it's about at that point, because to go ride at a skate park, it's expensive. It's anywhere to $12 for 4 hours to $40 to $50 for 4 hours. I'm not gonna say it's ridiculous, because skate parks, they gotta eat too, but just having the town aboard and understanding with our goals and concepts right there, you can create a lot of great things. A number of years ago, there was a mountain bike park that opened up in Cleveland, Ohio, called Ray's Mountain Bike Park. In that park alone, the size that park was, the footprint that it laid out, could not have been maintained with the payroll and the budget they had. But the volunteers that they pulled into that place were the best volunteers ever. They worked night and day to create some of these ramps, create some of these features to be released in 24 hours. Literally next day, overnight work just to release something. And that alone was an amazing experience to see. Like, they weren't asking for money. They weren't asking for a membership to the park. They weren't asking for anything except for allow their creativity to take place and allow someone to experience a portion of their creativity. And that alone's a joy to be a part of and a joy to see. And that park continued on to create a legacy within the mountain bike community all the way up to Canada, to Central South America, Europe. The whole globe knew about the place and would travel here in the wintertime to go experience this establishment. And they went on to continue and open up a park in Milwaukee, Wisconsin with the same business model and same vibes, and continued with great success. So, I mean, that alone right there was an amazing experience and drive and something to see and be a part of. But
It's really wild because, like, a few months ago, we went to a skate park, and we met up with one of your friends. And, he's riding there, and he's, his daughter's was maybe like 6, something like that.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just hilarious because here's this guy that was our age riding around being a Hessian on a skateboard and a BMX bike, and now he's a dad and he's bringing his kids in, and he's working so hard to help make that so much more accessible. It's like so cool to see.
Yeah, and this park in Lake Geneva specifically, my friend, they had a public prefabricated park, and he was very, very, very adamant. For someone, no political science experience, no social skills involved within constructs of government, he decided to join their committee and volunteer and get involved. He got involved in his community and was able to get the town to agree to create what is an amazing cement skate park in Lake Geneva. It's a staple in Lake Geneva. So to see what they came from, which was just a prefabricated magazine flip book park, to a custom cement skate park, is an amazing feature to see. And to see someone from our community involved in that, was able to be a part of their community, was able to merge the gaps and create the bridges and transport the equipment and lumber across the bridge for us to then join him. It was an amazing feature to see, and it's just, I don't know, it's a cool reality just to be a part of. We all come from different walks of life, and we all have the end goal of enjoyment and happiness on our little kids' bikes and skateboards.
So, like, what's been your secret? Because one thing that's really wild about you, man, is, when we were younger, the rest of us were kind of in the mode of, all right, we're going to go get girlfriends, get jobs, get, and, try to grow up really fast. And then, like, you're just like, no, I'm going to go ride in the woods. And, like, it was weird because, I don't know, you've just always had this ability to navigate healthy priorities in a way that none of the rest of us had. And I mean, unfortunately, we've lost a few friends because, like so many people, they really just couldn't. They went into some directions that are hard to come out of.
Yeah, I think not to discredit myself, but I don't want to say I had the idea of prioritizing or understanding prioritizing at that time, because I was, what would you call that?
Well, I mean, we've wasted a lot of time on stupid shit.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not all been, like, academically productive.
No.
But it's all been interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think, like, the concepts of growing up fast, I've neglected to accept, because it was inevitably was going to happen. And I think I was incredibly blessed with having a certain skill set to not have to necessarily worry about what if something happened. And that's just how I was, I guess, say, conditioned. But to dive into that deeper, I guess it kind of makes sense looking back at it and saying that it inevitably was going to happen.
Yeah.
Because life just does happen. You eventually reach a point to where your, like, self-esteem and wants and your own image that you have created for yourself really has to start eating something to to start to live and to create. And I mean, you can all live, if you want to call it happy-go-lucky with your family and the rest of your life, but I mean, unless you really start, like, getting out there and accomplishing things for yourself, like, you don't really have a taste of what growing up really means. And I think I didn't want to grow up at that age because I knew that was, like I said, that was just gonna happen. Like, that was just something you couldn't avoid, no matter how you added the math up or subtracted it. It just was gonna happen. So I just kind of just avoided that fear of thought of what if, you know, and I know it's probably hard to like wrap your head around or potentially believe, but just,
Yeah, a little bit, because, I mean, like, right off the bat, even since 4th grade, dude, I mean, it was just, you always had your head in the right spot. Like,
yeah,
we were all getting into, like, stupid trouble, and you're just like, oh, I got a thing I'm doing.
yeah.
Like, it was wild, and I mean,
I mean,
you
I still
know,
have my fair share of running from the police on my four-wheelers and dirt bike incidents and all of the woes and woes of growing up and being a little arrogant, ignorant teenager. But that I don't know. Maybe different environment, you know, like different friends groups surrounding me on top of that, and then the never really sure if I should be a follower or if I should be a leader. Always left me within that thought of like, nah, I got my own thing going on, guys. Like,
that's awesome. That's awesome.
but I mean, in the reality, when we kind of get to it now, we're all adults here. We're all got little juniors running around and families about and whatnot. So even if you were a kid and you grew up kind of late, you at least still knew what the end goal was.
Yeah. So, I mean, the world's kind of falling apart right now. We got, I don't think there's anything that people are not existentially concerned about. So, what's your hippie wisdom on where to go from here?
It's quite the rabbit hole, but I mean, to try to keep that hole not so much a hole here, more of a level walking field.
You can go deep.
No, yeah.
We got time.
I guess there's this kind of understanding that beyond the nation as a world, we're in a mental and a physical rock and a hard place, and there's a lot of things that have progressed substantially in the last 100 years, and to look at what is occurring and reoccurring and all of the I don't know how to word that, and look at where we're at now and to see just the distraughtness and the distrust everyone has in one another, and just general negativity. I think people need to take a step back, and including just the whole world in general, take a step back and look at what you are doing for yourself and stop pointing the finger. Point the finger at yourself for a minute, and once you do that and be humbled by that and seek out what maybe your neighbor or maybe your distant families are doing and how they're feeling, and by no means don't bring politics into those conversations, because that only tries to create some sort of a distance or opinions. By no means in a time like this do opinions matter. The reason why I say that is because there's enough facts in all of the information that is given to us that we're allowed to weed through, that we can choose to sort through, and so on and so forth. But seeing how everything's choosing to fall apart, and how governments are choosing to react, and how protesters are starting to get riled up, and things like that, it's a lot of unnecessariness for common people, and don't need to get involved with it. It just clouds what you really need to do. And focus on yourselves and your families and who's close to you and your family's reality. And that's honestly, as long-winded as that is, it kind of that helps me keep myself level-headed and helps me remind myself what happiness can represent in reality. It's
We're gonna have to unpack that a little bit because I know what you're trying to say, but like with the protests, um, there's a point. One of the things about living in a free society means that we all have the right to exercise our rights, to do what we want to do, and I know that you're probably of the mind, and I am kind of too, that there is a point where if effective and rational civic engagement is unproductive, what we're seeing happen is inevitable.
yes.
It's not new and it's not poorly understood.
No, it's well understood what is unfolding. You don't you don't have to. It's beyond the labels of conspiracy to physically see what is going on these days, and
I mean, there's a lot of weird stuff that's happened.
yeah, and you can't call it scripted media. You can't call it any of those things. But at the end of the day, here it's a lot of there's a lot of hands sticking their hands in this beehive, we'll call it, and I don't know. There's a lot of distrust kind of going on, and
There's a risk that that's the wrong word for some people.
yeah,
Because I know what you're saying, but I think it's easy to get confused. And so,
Yeah.
so beehive, you're not referring to any specific.
I don't want to label it as a government, or I don't want to label it as like a body. I'm more so labeling it as
But you're talking about like institutions of authority. You're not talking about groups of
Correct.
people. You're
Correct.
not, just to clarify,
Yeah.
because there's a little bit of ambiguity that I think can make people uncomfortable and confused about what it is you're saying.
yeah.
But no, go on. Sorry.
No, you're no. Best to be clarified with that, of course, and I think that's just kind of the catch here is we're all digging into a lot of information, and
And a lot of misinformation and propaganda, and that's
yeah, and I fall victim to doing a lot of research and finding open-ended credibility to that information, so I can't say that it's false, and I can't say that it's true. So it leaves me with an open-ended opinion upon that, and with certain subjects like that, I choose not to state my opinion just because I don't know enough about each side of the argument potentially to state anything relevant to the cause or the effect of the notion. In what's going on right now, we live in a free country from that aspect, and we're all entitled to our freedoms, and if someone's constraining one another's freedoms, then it's your right to speak up, fight for that, right? Of course. But as some of the things are standing right now, it seems there's a lot of just so much information out there to weed through and to potentially fight over information that's out there, whether or not it is falsified or proven to be true. It's our opinion, of course, but by no means should we be getting out there and destroying our country over these views on opinions.
well, like, and it's tricky because, man, talk about something that'll piss people off. I guess in a way we'd probably unfortunately get put into that tight category of conspiracy theorists, but it's not really a fair assessment because you and I have both kind of reached the same point where that rabbit hole of conspiracies, it's a confusing place, and there's a lot of people who struggle with how to navigate that world of information. And if you go into that taking everything as literal fact, that's going to warp your worldview.
Yeah.
That's not going to be a good thing.
You're gonna be a very disgruntled. You're gonna be a very different human.
Yeah, that it has not been working out well for Alex Jones in any way.
Yes.
You know, there's definitely, and I mean, it's wild because, I mean, it's growing. You know, the conspiracy theory, like the militant conspiracy theorist world. But the more important point that I'm trying to get at is like exactly what you're saying is, if you can navigate that rabbit hole with a healthy mind and the realization that you're not getting fact, you're getting propaganda. You're getting one side's intentional portrayal of something. And so kind of what you're saying, I mean, once you realize that, and once you come to a point where you realize that really nobody is selling truth, everybody is selling a narrative, it really reduces your ability to come to conclusions because you realize that you can't go with any one-sided story. You need to be willing to ask questions about what's not being said, or what's the other side, you know? Is there another side that's even allowed to talk?
The answers are nothing more than keys to doors that provide you questions.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say enough people don't have any keys, because that's not at all a place anyone has the right to stand in and say. But like myself, I feel confident sometimes, potentially egotistical, that I have enough keys on my key ring to open these doors and understand what's in those rooms. And the problem with that mindset is that's Pandora's box. You do not have any capability of putting back any of that information, wrong or right. You only can then better yourself on the understanding that that information you have is false, even though you may be under the pretense that it was truth. But having the value of yourself to understand maybe I was wrong about something is empowering alone. And next to the same empowerment is being able to listen to someone who has a completely different mindset and opinion than you, and gain enough sensibility from what they're saying to maybe change the views upon some of your opinions you've had. And that's all right as free thinking individuals and being what we are, to have these thoughts and to have these questions. But you gotta be very, very, very careful when you start going into some of this information and you don't have the mindset to absorb all of that information that has just been thrown your way. And now you have a lot more questions, and it just becomes a big question error.
Yeah, and I mean it's you know, to kind of bring it more into from the abstract, right? You know, one of the things that I think a lot of people struggle with, and if you look at all the things going on in modern U.S. culture, I mean, it's collapsing, and there's a lot of confusion about the source of that collapse. And for me, it's been really frustrating to watch our leaders pump up the narrative of foreign intervention when, I mean, you don't need to even necessarily be educated in the world of intelligence to understand that a lot of those foreign efforts utilize local behaviors, right? So if our leaders run campaigns that are misinforming people and, you know, relying on emotional mechanisms, absolutely foreign entities are going to leverage those things to cause divide and chaos. And
Yeah.
you know, the next level to that, I think the majority of people understand the nature and significance of, you know, nation state propaganda. But the part that I think a lot of people maybe don't realize is occurring on the scale that it's occurring, but also, you know, it's a gray space of where's the line between advertising and propaganda. You know, corporations.
Not to interrupt you, but we're based here in the Chicago region,
Yeah.
so we're part of one of the major cities. Where I'm going with this is the Midwest way of thinking is very drastic than the West Coast way of thinking. Very drastic from the way that the South thinks. So on and so forth. And when you look at propaganda in schooling and just the general sales pitch aspect it almost takes place in each region, you'll see that there's dramatic differences within the same similarity that they're trying to sell everyone. And you got a southern twang to the same similarity. And it's crazy to look at it that way because at the end of the day, when you sum it up, they're selling you the same pitch, just with a different regional slogan or schooling or
Yeah.
jobs, constructs that constrain the local people who have never left their area, so to speak, or who don't need to leave their area.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's there's some interesting stuff going on in that part of, you know, what you're saying about people not needing to leave their area. You know, we're starting to see some new efforts in you know, Native Americans fighting for their, you know,
Oh, yeah.
tribal lands, but you know, the government side of it is something that's so important, and if you were looking for a root cause of everything going on right now, the simplest answer for everything is a lack of civic engagement.
Yep.
We have just simply gotten far too comfortable with not paying attention to our leaders, and they've manipulated that comfort.
Yeah.
But the other side of it, that's, you know, how do we move forward with this experiment of democratic free market capitalism? We need to understand its history. And an important part of that history is the rise of the authoritarian state and Machiavelli's concept of, you know, the new prince, and how those things relate to the creation, establishment, and management of the corporate state. You know, people don't look at corporations as a nation, but when you're talking about a multinational corporation, you're talking about a legal entity that is operating in several markets. They influence trade. They influence the stability of, you know, foreign currencies, the U.S. currency.
Shipping.
They influence a lot of national policy and foreign policy, you know, and so it's this very strange pseudo set of ruling class just by nature of their operations, and they've benefited largely from the fact that the majority of people don't look at corporations for what they really are, which is a pseudo government. And how do we start getting people to get engaged?
Yeah, that's a hard one. From myself speaking, it's uniquely hard for me to get engaged. Personally speaking from it, because it's hard for me to see the end goal. There's it's a lot of murky things for an average person who works a blue collar job to keep track of. And this sounds like an excuse. By no means am I trying to make it sound like an excuse. I'm just trying to sound like the average person here, talking from experience. But to kind of draw people in and get them more engaged is it. I personally would believe it would be beneficial for more hands-on authority to see not so much for me to feel this sense that they're out to get me and to herd me. I'm not trying to say I have that sense, but I feel to try to get people more involved would be to maybe try to remove that potential paranoia that is tied to that sense of getting people involved in government. I think maybe not shunning people's or groups' opinions they have for their towns and communities would be very, very beneficial for drawing more people in. But for me personally, that's a hard one to look at.
And I mean, that was something I was kind of talking to you earlier about. Is, I mean, it's been very frustrating trying to get a few things off the ground, because the reality is that the majority of people are just crawling in defeat right now.
Correct.
Given up is too soft of a phrase.
Yeah, giving up is giving in, and that's still...
But I mean, people have almost entirely abandoned the idea that we could take what we have and just simply make it better.
Yeah, I mean, we gut houses all day long and leave them sticks. We replace the rotted wood, and then we make them into the next Taj Mahal to continue living in. So the reality of America and how it's systematically formed and assembled, it is a great mechanism. It is a great it's great in all defiable means. The catch here is that it needs to be rewritten and adapted. Like, I'm sure everybody has something to say regarding rewriting Constitution and amending things, etc., etc. But the point of the matter here is that we've expanded beyond what that was written for in the first place. And here we are today, going back to old world handbooks with, I don't know what direction they're planning on taking with this old knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, so far from what I've seen, as far as the proposals from, authoritative institutions, I'm not exactly liking the suggested route of recovery.
Yeah.
It kind of feels like they're giving up.
Yes.
And, but so, how do you navigate the potentiality that you're wrong?
Like you're so confident in something, you've gone so far that once you've reached that end of the tunnel where you now have to go back and start over again.
Not even if you've hit the end of the tunnel. You're going down the tunnel. You have your concept of what should be done.
Yeah.
And then you notice someone else is building a tunnel, a few miles away.
Yeah.
How do you navigate looking outside your tunnel while you're going down it?
Seeing what skills and sources you acquired and utilized to get you there, and are those skills solid enough for you to run back down that ladder you built? Within that, I guess to say now is maintaining the mindset that accepting that you were potentially were wrong, and going through that whole emotional boxing match with yourself, and obviously you're gonna win, but that getting
It's just a matter of which side of you is gonna win, right?
correct, yeah. Whether the bad side of you won or the good side of you won, but either way you won. But aside from the positivity of you winning,
There can be consequences.
the consequences is what you have learned that you can't take back going down that tunnel, and then what you are going to have to do to retrace your steps. You're gonna potentially be frustrated, of course, but you got to take that experience that you acquired and chalk it up as nothing more as an experience, and figure out the best way to adapt that potential experience as a positive learning experience, even though it was a negative result, you know.
Yeah, I think it's a lot easier if through the course of your life you spend a lot of time wasting time on the wrong way.
Yeah.
Kind of helps drive home the fact that maybe you did this wrong.
Yeah, it kind of comes back to my full circle, where when time is ready, it'll kind of happen, and it might bite you in the ass once you realize how much time you've wasted. You're like, time to go back to the starting line and restart my sprint here. But
So speaking of going back, there was something that you said that it's a really common thing that gets said, but it's an interesting paradox, and that's the idea about rewriting the Constitution. And what's the paradox about that is we so often say that it's time to rewrite the Constitution and abandon old ideas, but the founding fathers really tried to do something very radical, and it's sometimes really hard to appreciate just how radical it was. And so, where the legal foundations of our nation is the Constitution, first of all, it's worth pointing out that there was a lot of disagreements about which way to go, and does the parliament model make more sense? And we ended up, scraping that idea and surrendering to that concept of a singular leader, in the form of a president. But the irony is so the founding fathers wrote the Constitution, but that wasn't the only thing that they wrote. They actually wrote quite extensively about the project that they were taking on. And, something that they were all very clear about is that all systems of government are fallible, and that there is no perfect system.
no.
So if you were to go and read all of their essays, what those essays say is we, the American people, need to be constantly updating the Constitution. So, I mean, it's just an interesting paradox where we say it's time to rewrite what was written when what was written was saying we need to be rewriting it.
Yeah.
And it's
It's eating itself.
yeah, and I mean, it's just funny because people act like when you say it's time to amend the Constitution, they act as though it's such a radical concept, but it was really
It was
a
radical in the
foundational
first place.
belief.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean,
it was a lot of things based on principles that they saw fit for a nation. They did an amazing job for what it was at the time.
I mean, if you really look at, America as it was founded originally compared to today, America today, I mean, the original American framework was closer to anarchism than modern democracy.
Yes.
The whole concept was decentralized authority.
Yes.
And there's a lot of confusion about what anarchism is.
And if you ever come in encounter with some of the street punks in the concert scene or in the streets, they'll the grimy,
Oh,
crusty
yeah.
types.
Yeah, the punks who didn't understand the music they like.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you find a true punk, so to speak. They speak about America as it's this great system, and how the beliefs are all were all there, but yet how the system failed itself. And you're looking at this punk man, and it's funny because he's practicing what he's preaching, which is total anarchy. But he doesn't realize that he's part of the system that has put him there, or he has allowed the system to put him there. So it's unique to look at these preachers preach, but it's still not fully understood.
Yeah, and I mean, it's man, anarchism has been very poorly expressed and understood in the culture. But I don't know where I'm going from there. Oh no. I don't know. I mean, so if we were to change stuff, I mean, there's a lot of ideas going around. There's defund the police. There's the concept of a UBI. There's the minimum wage debate. There's thousands of debates going on right now.
Yeah.
What are the ones worth following and changing and making changes based on?
Well, my personal view on that, I believe wages, there's some things that could be changed within like wage brackets and all of that within our nation, so to speak. It's not to say that some of the areas being offset has anything to do with that, but the point I'm making though is equality throughout the board there, especially when you're talking on to the rights of freedom and defund the police and all of that stuff. I mean, these are all things that we have set up to not necessarily protect us, but allow us to utilize our communities a little bit better, like banks and firefighters, the things that my taxes pay for, I do enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot better with those things.
Correct.
You know,
to have the thoughts of not having those types of services is honestly quite frightening, and extremely blessed to be able to have those services. And it might seem harsh to say, it kind of sucks looking at the reality of some of the police brutality and some of the extremely negative things that are occurring. It's extremely, it sucks looking at that, because those are services that we need that are potentially being taken advantage of, and
definitely abused.
yeah, and that abuse paints a picture for some people, and then they now have an idea and an ideology that isn't healthy to have in the first place, so both parties are wrong in that position, and that's a frightening sight to see, when both the community organizations are wrong and then the law-abiding organizations are both in a position where they're abusing their power.
I mean, there's a lot of bad laws, and it's really crazy to me that Joe Biden's being touted as like this hero of the left, when I mean, he's in so many ways the architect of one of the most broken criminal justice systems in the world.
Correct.
And I mean, there's a lot of things to criticize with law enforcement, but if you're willing to, look at the four dimensions of your reality for a minute, you need to understand that law enforcement is dictated by law. Now, there's been some recent developments from sheriffs across the country who are finally starting to acknowledge that some of the things that law enforcement has hidden behind as excuses, basically they have a lot more autonomy with the enforcement of the law and the application of the law. But, if there's bad laws that they're forced to, enforce, they're kind of in a position that, and I mean, the unions definitely do not help.
Yes.
But
Their hands are tied, essentially, if they're stuck enforcing, I shouldn't say laws they don't agree with, because that's not their job to disagree or to agree, but sometimes when there's some pretty silly things that they're stuck enforcing, they take their own personal accountability into the factor.
well, and I mean, like, something that started, I'm not exactly sure when it started, but at some point, villages and communities across the country started looking at law enforcement as a source of revenue. And that was really a pivotal moment in the direction that the United States was going in. Because, you need to understand that law enforcement, by nature of their responsibility and duty, everything a law enforcement officer does is done under the threat of violence. So, if villages and communities are utilizing that mechanism of violence as a way to raise money because they don't want to, take on more difficult paths of addressing funding issues, this is what we get.
Yeah.
Undercover cops, that's the purpose of that. It's not an intrinsic motivation to further protect or improve the safety of the community. It's a tool to generate revenue.
Correct. And an undercover cop is the most... is as much as that is a tool for crime fighting.
It has its purposes.
Correct. But to have an undercover cop in the general surveillance of people is, again, it's a tool, but how they're choosing to utilize that tool is entirely in their hands.
But in many ways it's not, because what the criminal justice system as it exists today, you have a lot of people working in well-established patterns of thought.
Yes.
And it's definitely impacted law enforcement's ability to remain as a positive force in the community. And, so one thing that I'll say, I can't say names, but, since I've been working at my job, I've been very surprised at the conversations that I've engaged in with law enforcement. They definitely share a lot of our concerns, and shortly in the upcoming episodes, I'm hoping to bring some of them onto the podcast. But they're not the monsters that we think they are.
No, they're absolutely normal human beings like you or I, just with their career path.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we the American people just don't pay attention, and now we have a situation where we need to start paying attention.
Yes.
And
yeah.
I'm not really sure how we're going to go forward with it, because there's so much confusion. I mean, basically, we're going to have to ask the entire political system to immediately adopt an entirely new standard, but really not new. It's going back to what it was. It was.
They still have the structure. They're just putting a new siding, drywall, and a coat of paint, maybe some new carpeting. Like,
Well, it's always the same motivation of, let's legislate away the problems of the world.
correct.
And it's short-minded thinking. And what bothers me the most about it is, we're having this nationwide conversation about, how do we rebuild communities? And if you listen to all the conversations, a very concerning pattern is they're not looking at models of success.
No.
This is not something we are inexperienced in. Something that not a lot of people understand about the military is that combat is just one component of warfare. A large part of it is the hearts and mind component, building relationships, building communities.
It's the whole art of war.
Yeah, and I mean it's hardly new. I mean it's old. It's the oldest thing.
Yeah, they have a whole manuscript book written about it. I think from 780 BC. Was, forgive me if I'm wrong, everyone, but
They won't.
loose dating here. But there's a book titled "The Art of War," and it is a manuscript on how you conduct business. And war, being that it is business, it's
Whether or not many people want to acknowledge that.
yep. But those realities and concepts haven't been forgotten. And by no means are they new. And the only attribute that has a leg up on time is technology. Right now, that seems to be the leg up on the old war tactics, but still the tactics are still what they've practiced for years and years and years and years.
Yeah, and the technology is proving not to be of any assistance,
Not at
really.
all.
It's very difficult when people do not understand the nature of espionage. But so, the thing that's interesting to me the most in that context is, so the Defense Department has significant amount of resources, with decades of experience in building communities in places that are the hardest to build them.
Yeah.
We're talking about policymakers. We're talking about logistics. We're talking about, people who can come into conflict zones and build schools and build hospitals and get the people of that community to feel
Afford.
comfortable utilizing those establishments.
Yeah.
And, on the 5-year time scale, these things are very limited. But when you start to move out to the 20 and 30-year time scale, I don't think they've ever failed.
Not at all.
And I mean, it's weird because with all the conversations going on about rebuilding right now, we're very much underutilizing an incredibly talented and experienced group of people.
Correct.
And we're not talking about conflict zones. We're talking about places that need hospitals, they need schools, they need jobs, but they also need, and it's the biggest thing, and regardless of where you feel the lines need to be drawn, we all need to acknowledge that we're all going to be involved in that reestablishment of trust in the community. It's going to require law enforcement. It's going to require government. It's going to require the private sector. It's going to require us, the people living in the places we live, changing the way that we look at the community we live in. And instead of looking at it as, these are the things that I expect out of my community, we need to start looking for, where do I have the time and the resources and the talent to improve my community. And there's a lot of ideas on where we can invest. There's a lot of ideas on where, we could invest resources into doing things. But there's another resource that's not entirely free, but as close to no cost as possible, and that's us.
We the people have a voice. We've always had a voice.
But we got hands too. We can get to work.
We the people are also responsible for rebuilding this nation we call America. So with that said, I mean, government support or not, we the people have the power and resources to rebuild our nation.
And regardless of what side of the fence you may find yourself on, you should not settle for anything either side is selling you. No. Just because it's the people you agree with telling you there's a good idea doesn't mean it's a good idea.
No.
We need to question everyone and ensure that we're getting out of our government what we need.
Everybody is a suspect. And
that's one way to put it. That's one way to put it. And I mean, it's not that hard. I mean, we all spend so much time on social media, and maybe a few of us spend a lot of time on video games. It doesn't take much to send a letter or an email to your local representatives once a month and say, and if you're well informed about policy, you can communicate specific policy requests. If there's organizations within your community that you support and you really don't know how to do anything to support them, send your representative an email and say, hey, look, there's this organization, they're doing something, they're helping local businesses become more successful or engage with local government to be able to be better businesses, or trying to help the local schools to provide better education resources. It doesn't matter what it is. If all you can say is there's an organization that I think is doing good work, communicate that to your representatives. You can call them too. They'll actually answer. Well, their secretaries will answer, but
it's amazing to see the.
That might be their administrative assistants will answer.
Yeah.
Don't want to be sexist.
They're incredibly busy people, so bringing something to their attention and or agenda is what we're here to do. They're not going to sit there and pick and choose every single issue that someone has an issue about. That's a lot of people and a lot of issues.
Yeah.
But to raise to those authorities an attention to an idea or an attention to a movement, they might have constituents or people they're tied to that can handle situations or events or planning or negotiations or whatever it may be. We all need to stop having the feeling that they don't care, and more so be a little more compassionate to the fact that we're all busy people. We're all busy humans living our own lives. Just a friendly, hey, I'm so-and-so, I'm stating my voice, is enough to whether you feel personally rewarded for that, or, hey, the town is now aware of this situation, circumstances, or whatever it might be. It takes a voice, and it takes a few voices, and
it's never gonna get done if you don't ask for it.
yeah.
That's the thing. Like, everybody has given up so much on trying to get anything to be better, but nobody's even trying to ask.
Yeah.
And it's wild because if you go on Twitter, and there's been quite a few people trying to get, more civic engagement, they'll get thousands of comments of, well, that's a cool idea, good luck with that, or, well, that won't work. But nobody's taking advantage of the opportunity to find a group of people who are interested in doing the things you want to do and can help you develop a good strategy to do it, and just send an email. We're literally just talking about
We're not
talk
talking
to your friends online about the things you want changed, and send an email to your representatives.
Don't. And I'm not gonna call this like a waste of time, but don't spend so much time gathering names to write down on a petition, because they're gonna be like, oh, okay, cool, a bunch of people with the same idea. But to start a conversation with this idea has a lot more rooted meaning than a piece of paper with a bajillion names written all over it. And that does have some power and some push and pull, but it's your local governments and beyond that. A simple email just to get a chain of conversation going.
It's ridiculous, isn't it? Because, like, I mean, the idea of writing representatives sounds so hard, but I mean, it's something that, I mean, if you don't send emails every day, I'm not sure what it is. Like, congratulations, you've avoided the Matrix.
Yeah.
What
reward has that gotten, though?
I mean, it has its perks, I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes I get jealous. I'm looking at everybody doing the van life, and I'm like, it's starting to make sense.
KOAs, you rent a camping spot for $2 a night.
Yeah, but that's, I mean, trying to do the whole backpacking thing, but I'm starting to realize that I need to walk a lot more before I can start carrying around all the gear. But one thing that I think people are gonna get confused about, and people might actually accidentally confuse this as like a right-wing podcast.
Uh-oh.
Because we didn't just go ahead and say what everybody else is saying about police brutality, and it's don't get confused. We were going to get into some deep things later in much greater detail. So
if you're aware of, saying aware makes it sound funny. If you're copacetic with the thought of being open-minded, there's a lot of things that you can challenge within your own constructs of thought. You might find some new beliefs to some understandings that you have previously already had. You might find some new things that are so far out there that you might waste a couple hours on the old Google.
yeah, I mean, it's not a bad place to waste time. I'm not gonna lie. It's I'm not gonna say it's a staple to my career, but it might be. It might be.
Google and YouTube are definitely a crutch in my educational curriculum.
I don't know if it's a crutch. It's a fantastic cheater tool. I mean,
What do we have, Spark Notes?
that wasn't even useful. I failed every paper I wrote using those. But
Yeah.
I suppose that's a good spot to call it. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you everyone. Have a good one.